these shows on weeknights, on school nights.
It's out of character for you to go gallivant.
Well, I'll cop to that, but I'll go see a show on a weeknight.
Okay.
I got a couple of shows this spring on weeknights.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You go and have one pop and come home early?
That is true. I do have like half a beer, and then I
was surprised to see you at the end of the Cavs game, because when it was like blowout time and they were putting in the bench players, and I walked out and you were still there. I was like, oh my, Alan's out.
Well, we were. I mean, you know, it was a
work function.
Yeah, it was a work thing, and we were in the bar.
But there's also like been work functions where you are a ghost at halftime.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, like last time we went to, I think it was a Monster game.
Yes.
We had like a box, and I think you were there for one period, and you're like, bye-bye.
And by the way, I fully intended to do that the other night. It's just I ended up getting in conversations with people I hadn't seen for a minute. So, no, I'm going to the Overkill show in March. That's on a Sunday night. Wow. Think about that. I'm going to be going to a show on a Sunday night. The Dink is on a Saturday, but I'm going to a show the next night too.
Double dipping.
Double dinking. Single dinking.
Single dinking, double dipping.
Right.
The Alan Cox story.
But the Dink is on May 7th, and then Interpol is May 8th. That's this spring, boy, for shows, it's going to be dynamite. Alan, how many times did you see Rush? You want a confession?
You've never seen...
I never saw Rush live. Can you believe that?
What a loser.
As much as I love Rush and love Neil Peart, and I'm a drummer and you worship Neil Peart, I never got around to seeing Rush live. There, I said it.
Wow.
Publicly. It's my deep, dark secret. I've never got around to seeing Rush.
You ever seen Slim and Sham?
They put out a live album in Cleveland years ago, and that might have been before I was here, but or a live album of their concert in Cleveland.
It explains why you can't even say the drummer's name right. You've never even
Neil
seen
Peart.
it.
I've seen, again, people go, some bands a lot of times. I've seen 311 13 times, people say. Yeah, I mean, listen, and it's, listen, if you're fortunate enough to see a band that lasts that long, some bands come and go. I remember a couple of years ago when Greta Van Fleet first broke out, and everybody was busting their balls because they were teenagers who had clearly listened to a lot of Led Zeppelin records. But they went out on a tour, and, I had this conversation with somebody the other night. They were talking about Greta Van Fleet. And I was like, well, but imagine that you were a teenager in a band in your garage, and whatever has seeped into your brain musically, or whatever bands you like or are influenced by, under normal circumstances, you'd go out and do a bunch of clubs, and I don't know how long they're young. I don't know how long they busted their ass before somebody scooped them up. But right place, right time, and these guys break out of Frankenmuth, Michigan. They're like family friends of my wife's stepmother, right? And they blew up. And when they did that tour and that show at Nautica a couple of summers ago, it was sold out. And it was this weird mix of kids who really weren't familiar with Led Zeppelin and thought Greta Van Fleet were the funnest thing they'd ever heard. And then grown-ups who were like, finally, rock and roll is back. I saw a guy I knew from Pittsburgh who drove to Cleveland for Greta Van Fleet. Now, fast forward a few months, and people are like, oh, I see what's going on here. So they're going to have to, I think they're getting ready to put something new out.
They're going to have like an identity crisis?
Well, but you're going to evolve. I'm sure that kind of criticism, there's like a yin and yang there where you're really blowing up. But boy, people had their knives out for Greta Van Fleet. And you're like, these guys were young dudes. They were like goddamn teenagers. So to get to be thrust into the global spotlight, they're doing Saturday Night Live and whatever.
And it's also...
That's a tough road to hoe, man. So at some point, you're going to grow into whatever your sound is. Now, they might come back and have another Zeppelin-sounding album. Who knows? But I bet they don't.
But you understand why people would be so upset over someone ripping off Zeppelin, because they were so pure and they would never, ever rip off somebody else's sound or riffs or anything like that.
You mean like all the blues artists that Led Zeppelin ripped off? Now, listen, I mean, I understand if you feel, people feel very personal about bands they like and when they hear some young whippersnaps. But again, I always go back to, aren't you happy that these kids love that sound? When my son was younger, I was like, how do you know Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin? Because he was playing Guitar Hero. I'm like, awesome. I don't care how you get there,
right?
As long as you get there. Now, I did not have a great time at Greta Van Fleet. We went to see what the commotion was about, and because they're kind of family friends. But
did you meet them?
No, it wasn't going to be anything like that. Oh. No. But no, I've never met them. But again, they're like family friends of my wife's stepmom.
Keep on dropping it.
Or related to them or something. I don't know. But no, I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine. But it was like watching teenage guys who would normally be in their garage on a huge stage to a sold-out crowd trying to figure out what their kind of persona is. And that's a double-edged sword. Because nobody would turn that opportunity down. Nobody would go, nah, we're going to hang out we're going to do crappy clubs for another couple years and see where this goes. If somebody dangles a brass ring in front of you because it's right place, right time, you're going to go, yes, absolutely. I mean, there were pretty, bands that would go on to be pretty big bands, but if you saw them in their first couple of tours, you're like, oh, God, these guys have no stage presence. They don't know what they're doing.
Did they sound good?
Huh?
They sounded good, though.
Greta Van Fleet?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because those riffs are never going to sound bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So even if they don't know exactly how, they don't have the stage presence yet or anything like that. But also, you will go see Steely Dan and they sit down in chairs and play their songs. So, like, what kind of shenanigans do you need on stage to hold your attention?
Well, not every band is the same. A band like Steely Dan was never... I mean, they were a studio band. They didn't even tour until, like, they were done making records. So they were always a studio band. They were never going to be out there with pyro. But if you're a rock band, I mean, Steely Dan's a rock band, but you know what I mean. If you're a bunch of teenage cousins and you're in a rock band, and you're wearing beads and you got feathers in your hair and you're trying to figure you're barefoot, you're going to put on a show. So you expect different things from different bands. If you go see the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, you expect harps and things blowing up, I assume. I've never seen them.
It's a pretty crazy show, like the lighting and all that stuff. It's they try to play with all your senses. You can taste them.
It's like, I was David Draymond, who is the front man for the band Disturbed. And over the years, he's clearly moving into some, I don't know, he's always taken himself very seriously, and but I like Disturbed. They're a hometown band. He and I grew up kind of in the same kind of area, whatever. But he's clearly become a guy who has come around to, I don't know, he's kind of become an angry white guy over the years and whatever. And so he is very much on the side of Spotify in this whole Neil Young thing. David Draymond says, yes, fighting censorship and blah, 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 And that's the mistake that a lot of people are making with this whole Neil Young thing. We very much need to reiterate to people what the First Amendment is. Because, David Draymond and a lot of other people, primarily on the right, are like, Joe Rogan's entitled to say whatever he wants. That's absolutely true. You are entitled to speech. You're not entitled to a public forum. None of us are entitled to a public forum. So I'm not sure how it turned into a free speech battleground. I know that's clickbait, but...
Well, yeah, it's because people like to wipe their butt with the whole term
but that's not
free speech.
Yeah, I mean... All these right-wing wankers who've been screaming about the free market for decades suddenly don't like the free market, I guess. I don't know. But Neil Young was making a statement. I've seen a lot of people, Neil Young sucks because he was choosing censorship over free speech, and I thought he was a hippie and blah, blah, blah. He wasn't trying to censor Joe Rogan. Neil Young's not a dummy. He knew there was no way in hell Spotify was going to pick him. He said, him or me. He knew how that was going to... Now, granted, Neil Young has lots of money. So, yes, he said this will cut out 60% of my streaming revenue or whatever, but he's got plenty of money. So he has a privilege that younger artists obviously don't have. But it's also not censorship. He just said, he censored himself from Spotify. And now Barry Manilow has done the same, by the way. Barry Manilow followed suit.
They said, no, we are men of morals, and we don't want our music on this platform because we don't agree with what he's saying. We'll just take it. They can listen to it on Apple Music, where there's never been any problems.
Do they have problems too?
Apple's never violated human rights in order to make their phones cheaper.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah, you get it. It's like,
but
you can always pick a reason why you're like not going to support.
Of course you can. Of course, yes.
That's my point.
My singular point, though, is Neil Young wasn't trying to censor anyone. He said, "Look, I don't want to be part of this if this guy's here pumping out all this misinformation." There's this. It reminded me. There's this.
And he's got a very good reason for that because he was born before the polio vaccine was a thing. He had polio, and so he's very sensitive about that stuff because the vaccine saved his life.
Yeah,
the polio vaccine.
And listen,
so he doesn't want to perpetuate more misinformation about any vaccine.
And you might recall Neil Young, I think he launched his own streaming service a few years ago. Like, if you go to his website, you can stream his music.
Yeah, it's iHeart of Gold.
What's that? Is that what it is? iHeart of Gold. I think our lawyers might be in touch with him soon. Yeah, so, yeah, he has subscribers on his website who pay. I was reading that his service on his website, he makes about $600,000 a month.
Good man.
So I don't know. So obviously, yes, Neil Young is going to be just fine. But the fundamental point is still solid. He wasn't trying to censor anyone. He said, like I said, he censored himself from Spotify, is essentially what it is. There's this guy named Dan Bongino who was like a Secret Service guy back in the day or something, and he's one of these like rising right-wing talk show hosts. He's the guy that they were hoping would be the heir apparent to Rush Limbaugh or whatever. Essentially a podcaster that he's exhibit A of why a popular podcast can still be a really awful radio show. It's not a one-to-one equation. Anyway.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. Otherwise, so this Bongino guy who works for another radio company. He doesn't work for this one. He works for another radio company. They put him on like 400 radio stations. He was just in the news because I guess he got permanently banned from YouTube or something for, the same thing that they have a problem with Rogan. So he works for this other company. And back in October, when the company was going to institute a mask mandate, he goes, well, you can have a mandate or me, but you can't have both. He gave him an ultimatum, right? Well, they stuck with the mandate. He's still around. He didn't quit. Of course not. He's still doing a show. He goes, well, we're in ongoing discussions. There's no ongoing discussion. It was a stunt. He did it so he could pretend to be a tough guy. They can have me or they can have... Neil Young took his music off Spotify. This talk show guy, he's still there. Still doing his show. Company still has a mandate. It's like all these Fox News talking heads. Or they're all vaccinated. But they want you to think it's going to magnetize your blood or whatever. So, but everybody's painting this Neil Young thing like censorship over free speech. No, he was not trying. He didn't tell them, hey, can you edit Joe Rogan's show? It was nothing like that. And again, he's no dummy. He knew they weren't going to pick him. And he's like good friends with the CEO of Spotify. So this is not, But I see a lot of people, like people I know in this business, that were like, what happened to Neil Young? Since when is he into censorship? Well, I mean, he's into facts, seemingly, but it's not censorship. He gave a company an ultimatum. And anyone would do that if they were ready to plant their flag in it. But again, Neil Young is going to be just fine. So, you still got to pay the bills. I went to this company. I said, it's either me or Poundcake.
Yeah, I remember. That was tense. That was real tense.
And I'm here, bitch.
Yeah, how are you both here then?
Don't ask. We're in
trying to be a tough guy.
We're in ongoing discussions.
Alan.
We're in ongoing discussions.
I always stick up for my white kings. I said, I can't leave without him.
That's right. It's actually embarrassing because it was a complete misunderstanding of the term mandate. Hey! Oh, by the way, so somebody emails me and they go, "Hey, Alan, did you hear Bill Hader on Andy Richter's podcast? He used the word fruition."
Oh boy.
And so I pulled the clip. I don't think I get where he thinks that that's what he says. I'm going to assume that Bill Hader knows the word fruition.
Maybe he doesn't.
But come on.
Maybe he doesn't.
Of course he does.
And what if he does?
He's like a grown man. He knows. Well, I'll play the clip.
The charge I got was creating a thing and seeing it to fruition.
So I could hear where you'd hear him say fruition because it's
He says fruition.
He doesn't say fruition.
Why are you making excuses for him?
Because he knows the word is fruition.
How do you know that? Do you know him personally?
Why don't you know that it's fruition? Because you aren't good with English.
Maybe he's not good with English.
Bill Hader, he's like a writer and a producer and a comedy guy.
So stuff gets through the cracks.
The charge I got was creating a thing and seeing it to fruition.
He says fruition.
You think he says fruition?
No, I think he says fruition.
Yeah, me too. But I couldn't see where somebody would hear that and go, Bill Hader's like Poundcake.
Make excuses for people you like.
I like you.
And you make excuses for me.
See, I can't follow. I can't follow him.
He's a tricky one.
I do make excuses for you. That's right. All the time.
But you will not let me slide on fruition.
It's funny. It's funny.
What do you mean let you slide? I won't let you slide on a word that doesn't exist? No, I won't.
What you should do, Poundcake, is use that word more and more and more so that it becomes a word. And then Alan can eat crow that way because you turned it into a word.
Oh, the long con is what he should do. Chris Tyler. Play the long game.
Chris Tyler owes me like $100 because he said luxuriate was not a real word. And it actually ended up being a real word. And I was like, give me my money, Mr. Rich Man. You always want to bet people. He's like, all right, I'll give it to you. Put it on my tab. I'm like, I'm good for it.
Why did he tell you luxuriate wasn't a word?
Because he thought he knew everything. Since he got his degree and he knew everything.
What degree did Chris Tyler get?
Oh, I don't know. But I'm just saying.
You got a degree, too, in English.
Minor. But
you have a minor in English.
I use
my point.
I use luxuriate.
You didn't get one in phys ed. You got one in English.
I use luxuriate, and I used it correctly. And he was like, Poundcake. He's like, this is why everyone talks about you. Luxuriate is not a word.
It is a word.
And I said, it is.
Why didn't you come to me?
We were out. This was when we were hanging out with Chris Tyler, Erica and I, and we were out in the flats, and he had a drink in his hand, and he was just trying to...
Is this where you puked in his bathroom or whatever?
Probably.
Yeah.
He was just trying to condescend me, and he was like, I'll give you $100 if it's a real word. And I'm like, okay. So I Googled it. I said luxuriate, definition. And he was like...
Yeah, but so everybody was drunk, because he could have Googled it.
Well, whatever. He's still owing me money. I don't care.
Oh, text him and ask him.
However you want to fold it, however you want to iron it, he still owe me money. Give my money.
All right.
Everybody, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink on me. Everybody have a drink on me. Hey, hey, everybody drink on me. Brother Leslie, how?
All right, with no further ado, this is how we get the weekend going around these parts. It's the Bill Squire Friday Get Down in honor of the late, great Murray Soul here at WMMS. It's brought to you by Cleveland Whiskey. Are you ready, William?
Let's do it. It's Friday! You got to get down on Friday with some Cleveland whiskey. Start yourself a live stream and play to the camera. Make fun faces. Wink, do all those fun things. Live streamer, live streamer, live streamer. It's Friday!
The Bill Squire Friday Get Down is brought to you by Cleveland Whiskey. Mary Santora, your thoughts? You were able to watch it on the video feed.
Yeah.
That must have been thrilling. I can't see that. I can't even see him do it live. And it's only 3 in the afternoon there.
I know.
You still got the whole afternoon to mull it over.
It's the weekend now for you.
It's the weekend now.
You're welcome.
There you go. ClevelandWhiskey.com if you want to get all the details.